All right, guys, short video today. We're solving rational equations by what is supposed to be adding and subtracting. These are just one-step equations like what we did with integers, but this time, as you can see in the example, we're not using integers, we're using rational numbers. And the first thing I want you to keep in mind as we're going over these next couple of days with equations is I really need you to look at these fractions, this 2 over 3. I really need you to see this as one number. Yes, this is 2 divided by 3. This is 2 over 3. But when we're looking at these equations, we really want to look at these as this is 2/3. That's just a number, 2/3, okay? Just like if it was a 2 or a 3 or a 7, but it's not, it's just 2/3. So we'll go really quick because you've got a lot of practice with these. Step 1 is we're just going to draw our railroad tracks to remind us what we're doing. We're going to draw railroad tracks on each side of the equal sign. And again, this is just to help us remember what kind of what we're doing, that we make sure we do the same thing on the left as the right, that we know the process we're going to work through. We're going to circle the variable, just like we did with integers, and anything attached to it. So circle the variable, anything attached to it. Remember, the important thing not to forget is the sign in front of that variable. So in this problem, because it's just a one step, and it's an addition problem, we don't really have anything attached to the variable. It's just an x. Step 3 here's kind of, well, 4 we're just going to cross out because we're not going to worry about that step there. It's something that we kind of do in different ways than some of the other classes. But step 3 is just getting that variable by itself. We need to move everything away from the x so that it's by itself, and we do that using our inverse or opposite operations. And don't forget to do it to both sides. I know I'm going fast, but guys, we've been hammering this in for a couple of weeks now, and I feel like you can keep up okay. If you need to pause the video to write things down because I'm talking too fast, go for it. But right now I'm adding 2/3. I'm adding a number 2/3 to x, and the opposite of adding 2/3 is to subtract 2/3. And I need to remember to do that on both sides. So on my calculator here, we'll just let it do the work for us a little bit this week. We've got 1/2, and we're gonna minus 2/3. So I've got a fraction minus a fraction. Make sure it looks the same. It does, and my answer is, on this side they cancel out, and my calculator tells me that it's a negative 1/6, that we think x is negative 1/6. And I probably should have checked that before I boxed it in, because that's our last step, is to check our solution. It's something that you guys actually do really well this year compared to some of my old classes. You do a really good job checking your work. So we're going to take what we think x is, and we're going to plug it back in for x. So I think that x is negative 1/6. So I'm going to put a negative 1/6, and I'm supposed to add 2/3. And what I want to end up with is 1/2. So on my calculator, I need a negative fraction. I'm putting 1/6, and then I need to add another fraction, 2/3. And I'm hoping that I get 1/2, which I do. So I feel good about that. Remember, this check mark means it was correct. That doesn't mean write it down, put a check mark. If you type this in and you don't get a 1/2, there's not a check mark. It's wrong. Something needs to be fixed. And guys, that's it. Just one step. We're adding and subtracting to get rid of whatever's kind of going on with the variable. Tomorrow we'll be working on multiply and divide, but for now we're just going to stick with addition and subtraction, just help you get a little bit comfortable with it. So let's go through 3 problems. I'm going to keep going fast, so if you need to pause the video at any point, go for it. But I'm going to draw my railroad tracks, step 1. Step 2, I'm going to circle my variable, which right now is just an n because there's nothing else attached to it. And I want to get rid of this plus 12.8, which means I need to minus 12.8. And so I'm left over with an n because these cancel out, and I've got negative 0.3 minus 12.8. So negative 0.3 minus 12.8 gives me negative 13.1. And I think that's my answer. Let's double check by plugging it back in. Negative 13.1 plus 12.8 should equal negative 0.3 if we did this correct. So negative 13.1 and I need to add 12.8. And I get negative 0.3, which is what I wanted. So I feel good about that answer. I'll box in my solution there, that n is equal to negative 13.1. All right, okay, number 2. First thing, railroad tracks. I'm going to circle my variable. It's got a positive there in front of it, a plus sign, so that means that we're adding m, which in a lot of ways means we can look at that like a positive, but we don't know what m is. M could actually be a negative number. So we circle the sign, we circle the variable. We're left with this 4 2/5 kind of floating out in front. Now there's nothing in front of it, but we've been doing this long enough. By now we know that this is a positive 4 2/5. And to get rid of it, I have to minus 4 2/5 from this side to make it go away. And then I need to minus 4 2/5 from the other side. So I'm going to be left over with an m. And let's go ahead and plug this big messy fraction in. I've got a negative, and then I'm going to use my mixed number. So I've got negative 3 1/2, and I'm minusing 4 2/5. When I hit enter, I get negative 79/10, which looks like kind of an ugly fraction. It ends up being what? Negative 7 9/10. So I like it in this form. I'm going to leave it like this, but let's plug it in and see if we get the right answer. I want 4 2/5, and instead of m, I'm going to plug this in up here. I'm going to add a negative 79/10, and I want to see what I get. I want to make sure I get negative 3 1/2. So go back to my calculator, and I've got 4 2/5, and I'm going to add a negative. I'm adding a negative 79/10. So I make sure I put my add, and I make sure I put my negative, and I get negative 7/2, which is negative 3 1/2. It's kind of hard to see it in that form. So if you want to switch it, we can go ahead and switch it from a mixed variable or an improper fraction to a mixed number, and it's negative 3 1/2. So we feel good about m as negative 79/10. Okay, last one, number 3. P minus a negative 19/6. Really quick, I'm going to get rid of that minus a negative. I don't like that double sign, and hopefully you're doing this yourself at this point, that you've got enough practice with it. We're going to get rid of the minus, change it to a plus. P plus 19/6. I'm going to circle my P. The opposite of adding 19/6 is to minus 19/6. So those go away, but I've got to do it to both sides. So minus 19/6. I'm left over with P equals, I think, let's plug in this mixed number. We've got, oh, I need a negative sign out in front of it. Let's start over, make sure I get my negative. So I've got a negative 2 1/2, and we're going to minus 19/6. And I get negative 17/3. Again, a improper fraction. I'm okay with that. I like improper fractions. They make it easy to do math. So I'm going to take this number and plug it in. Negative 17/3 minus a negative 19/6. I'm hoping comes out to be negative 2 1/2. And I know my writing's all kind of blurring together here a little bit, but we had a lot of numbers there. So let's plug that in. Negative 17/3. That's what I think P is. And then I need to minus, parenthesis, a negative fraction, 19/6. Close my parenthesis, and I'm hoping I get negative 2 1/2. Negative 5/2. That looks like negative 2 1/2 to me. I want to make sure, and it is. So we feel good about that. Now it's your turn. You've got 3 problems. Take your time. Just careful of the signs. Remember, this negative 7/9, that's just a number. So you need to do the opposite of minusing 7/9. What's the opposite of doing that? And the same with the minus 1/4. So good luck. Come show me your work when you're done.